So, you all ready to start here? Let's do a few announcements. First of all, as a number of you have pointed out, I still don't have a Suite 3 test up there for you all. This is because I've been too damn busy learning Angular advanced topics enough to be able to talk about them, and I have not had a chance to do the other yet. I would point out, though, that that's good news for you in a sense, because it means I'm not going to enforce the deadline today either. I should get it out tomorrow, and we'll have a deadline a day after I present the Suite 3 as available. So it'll be at least 24 hours after I get it out there for you to get done with it. I'm presuming the people who are working steadily on it have built their own test suites, as you should, and are reasonably satisfied that it's working for your purposes, which is the main thing. You shouldn't find too many things you need to tweak once we put our test suite out. Looking at what some people are doing, I'm finding that ours is likely to be less rigorous than yours, and that's a good thing. I'm glad that you guys are doing a good job in getting good test suites together. So the positive news there is simply that there is more time to get that done, except that, of course, the main pressing deadline is that we are 1 week away from the final now. We're going to finish our Angular discussion today. And at that point, you should be able to begin work on the Angular aspect of our projects. And just as with Node, there were 3 levels to do. So with Angular, there are 3 levels to do, and they're just posted up on Polylearn about an hour or so ago. So if you want to take a look at what the shape of those projects looks like, that's where it is. Now, I'm playing that a little bit by ear. This is a new topic for me as well, and I want to make sure that what I've asked you to do is not outlandishly difficult for any of those levels. So we may adjust that as need be if it turns out to be harder than I thought it was. But the first level is fairly simple. It's just adding some errors to the register dialog display so that people can see what went wrong if their registration failed for one reason or another. And then the next level up involves reorganizing the attempts and challenges listing, so it's not just a bunch of attempts, but they're grouped by challenge. And the third level has somewhat more elaborateness to it. It's managing courses and enrollments for a teacher. So it involves making a small service as well. And that's what we would look for individual work in Angular. Having completed that, you are invited and encouraged, if you haven't already been planning on it, to get together with others who have also completed both level 3s in each of the 2 areas and consider doing a project together next week once you're done with the Angular stuff. We will technically make all projects and demos due on Thursday next week at 3 o'clock. As I said in the spec, we'll do time-slotted demonstrations of your Angular work. That's why we'll grade that. Jonathan and I will both kind of double team to do that. When it comes to the team project, for those trying to aim for that, I recognize it's pretty tight scheduling. It's going to be a bit of a code-a-thon to get the thing done by Thursday. We will look into the possibility of letting it ride as late as Friday or Saturday of next week to finish those projects, if I'm permitted to do so, with the grading structure that is required for a 5-week course. Jonathan and I will both be working over in the tech park doing another course at that time anyway, so it's perfectly fine with us to have you come in and do a demo a little bit later if that would be useful for you. But again, no promises. I'll just do the best I can for that one. I think that perhaps next week would be a good time for some in-person office hours as well. We've been trying to follow up on Piazza fairly consistently, but I imagine that people might want a little more support next week, and we'll try and arrange some of that. It would be located over at the tech park. Jonathan and I both work over there, and so the easiest thing to do, if you don't mind, is to come over to that building. We would be right next to the warehouse. If you're not familiar with where the tech park is, there's actually a nice high-tech building out there for various small firms that are working with Cal-Poly students. My little object software inventions is among them. So we try to run those at that time. Jonathan will be back next week. He's on a much-deserved vacation, as you know, and so we'll have 2 people on deck, not just 1, to help out, and we'll get you the support you need. Let's see, any questions on administrative matters at this point? Yeah.
So are we turning in all 3 levels of the Angular project at the same time, or do we need to submit them over email, have it be graded for 1 level, and before we work on the next level?
As far as not quite all three levels of both at one time, but I'm expecting most people will want simply to say, okay, I'm done with level 3 of Node.js. I've passed the test suite that will supply you. And at that point, as I think I mentioned in an earlier email or post, I've forgotten, you give us a URL of a working version 3, your sworn testimony that it runs against our test suite, and we'll spot check it a little here and there, and then probably ask you to do a zipped submission of the source, so we have that on record, but not much more than that.
I was talking about the Angular levels.
For the Angular levels, we'll ask you to demonstrate whatever you have completed by Thursday. And again, probably ask for a zip of your source, so we have that on record. And that'll just be a hand check, nothing that's automated at all. We don't have the energy in this 5-week class to get into automated testing, although it's a very powerful feature of Angular. So just a visual walkthrough demo. Yeah.
Are all three levels of Angular required for a B?
Yes, these are a cumulative thing. And if you're able to do level 3, you won't find level 1 and 2 all that hard anyway. So it is, however, build one on top of the other, do all three. So start with the D level thing, and you know, there's a good reason for that anyway, which is you get warmed up to Angular, and it's an easier thing to do. And I think we were a little bit, I don't know, the work for the first version of the Node.js was rather more than just a little bit of a D grade type of, show modest ability. I would, in retrospect, maybe have made fewer bugs in that. However, the big lump was just to get the dang thing up and running. And there's not much we can do about that. You've got to do something. And, so unfortunately, that was harder than we thought it should be. I think, I hope at least, that the first version of the Angular is significantly easier, as long as you can get my release 0 up and running. That you will have to do, though. Yeah.
Were there any specs posted for the team project or just?
No, that's something you post to us. So you need to propose a team project and say, here's what we think would be a cool thing to do, and we'll approve it as sufficient for an A-level team project. We might ask you to do a little more, but experience indicates usually it's the other way around. We might suggest that you tone it down because people become ambitious on these, and we appreciate that, but we also like you have you get the A. So, yeah. Yeah.
It says on the spec that the Angular project will involve improvements to R0
Mm-hmm.
release. Is that going to be posted, or did you need?
The R0 release, I thought I posted a zip for that. That's the one we were looking at on Tuesday,
Oh, okay.
right?
It says V0 on that, but.
Oh, it says V0 on the release I gave you?
Mhm.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's confusing. I called my branch R0 for release 0, but the one I gave you on Tuesday is the bottom line. Yeah.
It talks about like a separate apps.js, but I don't see that anywhere.
Um,
Can you just swap it in, or instead of save R somewhere else, use the apps.js file?
okay. Is that in the spec?
It's right under the polymer post for your.
Oh, yes. Okay. Did I not post the apps.js for you?
No.
Oh, my apologies. I will get that then. Let's see. I don't want to stop the class to do it, but if you remind me at the end of our first break, I'll get it up there during the break. The thing about the release I gave you on Tuesday is that I found I needed to improve some aspects of the JS side, right? Of the JS, of the Node.js side. And I couldn't just bundle it all and ship it out because I would have been releasing all of version 3, which is included in that particular branch. So I had to give just one file. Other questions? Okay. Let's see here. Oh, I should have added. I'll get a general concepts list out so that you can use that as a basis for studying for the final exam. And I think we will devote part, if not all, of Tuesday's lecture to review and going back over the various ideas, maybe going back and looking at the source code bases that we've been examining, give you a chance to kind of review and lock down any things that were not clear the first presentation. So I don't expect a whole lot of new material next Tuesday. However, I will do at least some. In particular, I want to implement waterfall. The more I'm looking at people's code, the more I'm realizing that in retrospect, teaching this class a second time around, I'd require waterfall design. Some of you are killing yourselves with these pyramids of doom and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And part of web development, because of its great complexity and intricacy, is just to get the code simpler, so that you don't have to get trapped by little tiny bugs here and there. And the waterfall pattern is a very strong way to do that. We'll actually implement it. It's not much code. I haven't done it yet, but I expect it's about that much code to do waterfall, the actual function waterfall. And we'll get a clear picture of what's going on when we do that. Today's topic and concentration will be the same thing as on Tuesday. We're going to go through and try to modify code. So please bring up that release I gave you. Even if I don't have the ads file, I feel bad not having that to you. Let me just get it up there right now real quick. Let's take a 1-minute break while you get that up and running, and I'll go and post that ads file to the Polylearn. That should do that. Yeah. You should be able, if you plug in the ads.js file I just released, should be able to run main.js as your node server, and then yes, log into localhost. There's no need, to my knowledge, for any further npm installs. I think, yeah, actually, you might need to install async, but that's just npm install async, and you're done, because I used waterfall. Otherwise, the ads.js file should suffice. If that is not so, then during the next break, let me look over people's shoulder and see what we need to do to get this right. There may be another tweak or two that I missed with all the different things that need to get right in the web app. So, but yes, you are supposed to be able to run it. And I want people to try to, because it makes a big difference if you can write the code and see it work and modify as I'm doing, as opposed to just looking at source and trying to modify it and guess. Okay. Any other questions at this point? And let's pick up where we left off last time. If you recall, what we were trying to do was take the page that was showing, up here, page that was showing the attempts for a user, and actually give the user's first and last name. And what we realized we needed to do in order to do that was that the controller for that page, up here, needed to have an additional user dependency injection given to it. And we went back and looked at UI routes and added to the resolve property of UI routes a second dependency that could then be injected. And when I ran it, it blew up. And if you recall at the time, I muttered to myself, I really need a linter on this, because what it turns out to be, I don't know why this thing is not showing proper linting response right now. It should be. I was missing a comma here, and that was the problem. So I have added a linter here. It's the standard, I think, linter-js hint in Atom. How many people are using the Atom editor, by the way? Anybody doing that? Okay. I do recommend it. What are you using for text editing right now? Sublime? Okay. That's a geek war. Some people think Sublime is better. Some people think Atom is better. I'm sure either one is fine. Atom has been steadily gaining against Sublime. It was the newbie about 2 years ago, and everyone's saying, well, maybe this will be better than Sublime, and now everyone's saying, oh, it's better than Sublime. So it might be worth considering, but either way, you can get a JS linter, I'm sure, under Sublime just as readily. And I finally installed one myself a couple of days ago. Should have been doing it long since because it saves a huge amount of time. By the way, in the same vein of saving time, I realized in retrospect that I had misinformed you when I said that you need to restart Node.js when you change the Angular content in the public directory. As a matter of fact, that's not the case. It's not caching it. So if you change the files and then go back and refresh on the client side, so the browser goes and fetches new versions of the files, you should be set to go. And that saves a hell of a lot of time, not least because it means you're not forcing a log out when you restart the Node.js server. Of course, it loses all its sessions. But not having to do that makes this a whole lot faster. So a linter and a faster cycle should help a lot today. All right, let's see if I got this thing working now. For all I know, it'll still fail. But what I was hoping was that we'd get it running. If not, I will figure out why. I'm going to refresh this and make sure that I'm doing it right. So log in. Oh, we're still blowing it. So something's wrong. Let's figure out what. So I got my injected user here, and I'm actually not sure myself, so you guys can help me out. I thought it was going to work now. And when it comes to the apps route, we have user. I've been set up, and my linter is now reminding me about all my missing semicolons. I'll add those as I go by. This is supposed to fetch. What should I be doing here to see what might be going wrong? Suggestions? You're going to be doing plenty of this yourself this weekend. So, console log, yeah, that's worth trying. Also, I think that as a quick triviality, I'm going to stop looking at the thing here without a console. Oh, my God, something's wrong. Okay, so looks like we've got a problem in apps controller JS2 unexpected string. And you can actually see the files that are on the browser side, by the way, by just clicking on them. Huh, that's interesting. The comma's not there. Say again?
The comma's not there.
Right, exactly. It's sometimes useful to look at what the browser has as well as what's on the server side. And never forget that there are two different things potentially. I'm not sure why a refresh isn't fixing this. That's kind of curious. Yeah. Maybe I need a hard reload? Yeah.
If you go to the network tab, I think it's the network, sometimes Chrome keeps a cache. So you should click on disable cache at the top.
Oh, thank you.
Checkbox, higher.
Here.
It says disable cache.
Yeah. Okay.
And see if that works.
A hard reload also will do that generally. Don't do an empty cache in hard reload, by the way, because these things are being loaded over the internet, and it'll reload all of your Angular min. It takes a while, all of your Angular JS files. Let's see if that does it. No, we're still not looking good. You know what? Let's see here. I know what's wrong. File didn't get saved. Right. And I promise you all will make the same mistake at one point or another. So I should have been more careful about that. Okay, so well, there's at least a step in the right direction. Let's see what console has to say. That's clean, but we're not getting anything in the attempts for it. So still not quite there. The attempts at least are right. So the attempts template. I've got attempts for user.firstname, user.lastname, right? So Seems to me that that ought to be filling in the first and last name if I got my user correct. And going to attempts controller here. Scope.user equals user. All right. Yeah.
Missing a closing carrot in that other file.
Closing carrot in which other file? The template file?
Yeah. Right after at challenge me. Value equals at challenge me. Do you need a closing?
Around that input, yes, I do. Not sure why that would cause a problem though, but it's worth a try, and I saved it. So let's see if that makes a difference. No. So what's next? What are we going to do to debug it? Looking for volunteers on this. The whole point is to get you used to the debug cycle. And I'm not really sure what's wrong with this one. I have plenty of them I have planned, but not this one. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Console log stringify user.
Yeah, I think we're going to console log. Is that okay?
JSON log stringify.
Okay. What am I going to get if I just do user? Object, object. All right, so I need JSON stringify. All right. Let's find out what's going on there. Looks good to me. Got a first name? Got a last name? So we got the right user. With the challenge name, did that work out? Yeah, I got those. Try hard read those. Just to make sure.
We're getting an array.
Yeah. And that one I have come across a half a dozen times. Noted. Amy, you and I had a bug just like that you were looking at, right? The thing likes to produce arrays when it does database results, right? And even if there's only one result, it's tempting to think that that will be a single object. No, it will be an array of one element, bracket 0, right? So let's look back at the UI routes. To fill this thing in for user, I did a get for a particular PRSS, and then resolved the result of get. And apparently what I got back was a array instead, and you can tell that by looking at the content here. See the little brackets. Okay. And the reason that's the case is that on the Node.js side, all I did was take the result of the database, select, and drop that straight into JSON and fed it back out. Now, I might have been a little more careful on the JS side. I think this is actually a bug on the Node.js side, isn't it? Because the spec says if you get a given person, you don't get an array back, right? So what we've got is a server-side bug. Let's fix it properly. Although, obviously, by indexing 0, I could have done the same thing here. So let's see here. And RSS.js. There's my get. And there's my post. Here's my get identifier ID, and I'm checking that there is a length, and then I'm just doing, so what should I be doing here instead? Bronx 0. Okay, save file, and let's see if that'll work. Still getting an array? What's wrong? Half the drill here is visualizing all the different things that need to be restarted and when not, and so forth. I have to restart. How come I didn't have to restart? I've been modifying JS for the last 20 minutes here. How come I didn't have to restart the server then? Say again? Yes, the first server-side change. All the other changes have been in the public directory. They've been loaded to the client side, and the browser's been looking at them and running that JS. And I refreshed that with a reload, and I'm good. But on the server side, no, I'm going to have to restart the thing. And part of the reason I'm drilling this is that I don't want you to spend 30 minutes, as I have done now and then, on that sort of thing without thinking about it. Now let's see what happens. Okay, and why is that? Because I logged everybody out. So I got to get in here and do this. Okay, there we go. Finally. By the way, you do begin to appreciate Java a little bit in cases like this. Because in Java, if I had said this is an object and it was actually an array, I'd have been slapped by the compiler instantly. It's total type clash. But JS, it's like, yeah, whatever. Right? So that freedom is not always all that happy. It kind of depends. Right? Okay. Any questions on this one before we go on to the next thing? Yeah. It's out there. Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's see here. Go look at my plan thing. I think the next thing I wanted to do was fix the dates a little bit. And this was an exercise in documentation and filtering, so I'm going to ask you to go do a bit of research hunt for a couple of minutes here. But what I'd like to do is a relatively simple thing. I'd like to modify this display here where it says 71216. Remember, we did that with a filter. Remember the idea of a filter? It's a generalized data transformer, generally used for formatting. An important concept, not as trivial as it might seem. For instance, as I gave an example of internationalization. Internationalization systems use filters, and everything you do is piped through a filter to get it formatted in the right string. So it's a powerful concept. There are built-in filters, remember? And in fact, we're using one here. If I look at the code for the template, when I print the date, I am using a filter right there. It's a bit of weird naming stuff. That's actually date filter, but we say date in the actual HTML. Also, the pipe is not an OR, even though it would be easy to think of it as such. It is a pipe, meaning like Unix pipe. Feed this into that. And then the colon qualifier allows you to parameterize the date a little bit. What I want to do is add the day of the week. I want it to be like Tuesday, 7/12, whatever, as opposed to just the 7/12, whatever. What you will find is that that takes a bit of work, and we're going to be putting something different in here. How do you deal with the documentation is half the game. By the way, if you don't already have bookmarks with all sorts of pointers to various pieces of documentation, you really should. I work constantly with a browser that I have half a dozen important bookmarks on. Where's your go-to place for finding out details about built-in Angular stuff? Angular API references. It's the Angular site. I have to expand this to get it to look the way it normally does. There. Okay. Bring that up. And if you don't already have it bookmarked, bookmark it. Now, if you scroll around in here, you'll find information on the filter in question and how to format it. And again, part of the point is just to get people looking at this page and using it briefly for a research project. And I will take suggestions on how we should change our HTML in another minute or two here. Actually, you know what? Let me do a brief tour of this just to talk a little bit about some of it. First of all, it's divided by modules. NG is the Angular module. And one of the things that Angular itself supplies are a bunch of built-in functions that are worth talking about. Some of them are just obvious stuff like, is this an element? Is it defined? Is it a date? Tests that are not easy to do in native JS. There are a couple that I thought I would point out in particular because they're a pattern you see in other libraries as well. Merge. This particular thing here, there's one like it in jQuery, there's one like it. You find probably about a dozen different libraries that have something just like this. Okay? A common useful task in JS is to take all the properties from one object and copy them across into another object. Merge is a fairly good way to describe that. This function does that. It takes two or more, you can pass as many parameters as you like, objects, and takes all the properties of the ones to the right and merges them into the one to the left, the first one, and also returns that result. It's not uncommon to see the leftmost one as an empty object because you don't want to modify either of these two, you just want all their stuff in here. And so when you have the utility task of taking properties from object A and merging them in with object B to make a sort of super object that has all those properties, don't forget that there's a function for doing that. Never write that by hand. And there are even two forms of it in the Angular library. The question obviously arises, if you're copying properties across, you're just copying the references across? Is that a shallow copy? Are you going to do a deep copy if the thing being copied is itself an object? Does it get copied and so forth? And the answer is it depends on what you call. The merge, as it says, deeply extends the destination object by copying its own enumerable properties across. And there's a, I think it's extend, and this one does it shallow. Right. So you kind of have a choice. Deep equals. JavaScript screamingly lacks a good syntax for deep equality checking. If you're in Java, you know the distinction between equal, shallow, or dot equals, deep. Well, you usually have to have a library function for the dot equals equivalent, and here it is. And again, this is very commonly available in other libraries as well, but if you need to do a deep comparison of equality, the dot equals is available to you. And you know, kind of check the others out as you come around, but you find that if there's a kind of general utility you want in JS, a lot of it will be in this library. And then, of course, there's all the directives. And these are the things that you can actually stick into the HTML, either as a attribute, like ngBind or ngClick, those sorts of things, or as an actual tag name. So it depends on the directive which one you do. But directive, important term in Angular, means a notation in Angular that allows you to modify HTML itself, gives instructions for how to alter the HTML in Angular's various ways, whether it's add this event handler or add a connection between the HTML content and underlying scope or what have you. So all of those are in here. Everybody remember the naming convention? If you, assuming that people have done a little bit of background reading by now, perhaps not. ngBind, for instance, notice that it's named ngBind, but when you get to the HTML, it's ng-bind. That's a general principle. So they're named differently from the way they're used in the HTML. I can do that. All sorts of things in here. And then the thing you're really looking for are various services. First of all, things we've been looking at, HTTP is in there. If you want to know the particular things you can call in HTTP, queue, a number of other things, and then here are the filters. obviously we want to look. Okay. End of brief tour of this, mostly as consciousness raising. I'll let you explore it out from there. But tell me what format we're going to need for date. We had, you should have a source code so you can check in the necessary template file. So I guess the real question is which template file here? Yeah, at template HTML. And you can see what format I'm using at that point.
What do we want to add to that? Do we want to add?
I want to add the day of the week at the beginning. I want to be Tuesday, 7/12.
Okay. So take out the day, make it.
Well, no, I want the date as well. I want everything that's already there. I just want Tuesday ahead of it.
Okay.
Or whatever day it is. So, any brave volunteers here? Yep.
Did you do the 4 E's in front of the short?
Yep. Except that you can't, I haven't tried it, but I don't believe you can simply stick the 4 E's in front of the short. What you ultimately have to do is literally take the short and then drop the 4 E's in front of it. So we got all this complicated notation. There's the short notation. I can't use short anymore. All I'll do is go back here, drop that in directly. Oops, blew it, sorry. Try again. And 3 E's. Save and reload. And we go. Okay, and everyone has the bookmark now, right? Good. Okay. Start new attempt. Right now, provides me with a nice console message that says, start new attempt. I think we should be doing something more. So the big task now, next phase here, is we're going to do a start new attempt process. So one of the first questions is, you want to start a new attempt, that's nice. What challenge would you like to start an attempt for? Remember, you've got to specify the challenge. So we're going to need some means of entering that. I propose a small pop-up dialog, because once you know how to use modal dialogues, we already went through the example of the notify dialog and the UIB modal call and all of that. So we're going to do that here. We're going to make another dialog, and we're going to have just a field to enter in what challenge you want, and then use that in turn to do a call to actually create a new attempt. And then ultimately we're going to need to refresh the list of attempts if it succeeds, and let people know when you show the new attempt in the list. Okay? So all that needs to go in here. As always, some example code pretty helpful, I think. So does everybody remember where we have a dialog we can look at as an example? I did that notify dialog service. It's under util. Talked about it on Tuesday. And what that did was use the UIB modal service. It's provided automatically by one of our include files for Bootstrap that lets you start a modal dialog. And it has an open call. And then some properties that I give it. I give it URL, which is this picture of the dialog and how the URL or the thing ought to be laid out. I give it a scope, because every view needs a scope to satisfy notational things like mustache, curly braces, or to know where to put its data when it's entering data, that sort of thing. A size, which was small. And then, very importantly, when I run open, I get back an object that includes a field result, which is what kind of thing? Does anybody remember? It's a promise. And we're going to be using promises here. We talked about those, of course, on Tuesday. So, with that model in mind, please try your hand at writing some code. To do this, you're going to need a template, obviously, first up. And as I commented on Tuesday, no one ever writes this stuff from scratch. So you can go and steal, well, the template for notify dialog is a possibility, but I'll tell you right now, I tended to like the one for register because it has a lot of nice fields in it, and I can just chop it down to size. So if I take that, I can do something with that. We want an input that lets people just type in. And to be clear, all I want the dialog to do is say, type in the challenge name you want. So MM, mmind F41. I should type that in and then hit OK and go on from there. Although cancel would be nice as well, if we can do that. I don't know. By the way, where do you find documentation on UIB modal? Everything is generally under the rubric of Angular-UI. A lot of different things. The router is there. So is the Bootstrap library, and the UIB modal is part of that. So I have a bookmark to that one as well. And they're all on GitHub. It's the same drill you're accustomed to from the MySQL, for instance, where there's a hopefully well-written wiki describing this stuff. And the Bootstrap is not as clear as it might be, in my opinion. And sometimes you find that you have to drill down in the source to the thing you want to get information on. So let's do source. And now we got pieces that look like they are components, accordion, alert buttons. This looks a little like jQuery UI, same kind of deal, right? So modal, that looks promising. Let's go down to modal here. Okay, and nothing here but other docs. Well, that's good. So I got a demo and a README and some direct stuff here that explains sort of how to use it. And so that's your documentation. That plus example code and Stack Overflow. Find it, please, and bookmark it. You're going to want this stuff. I don't know about you, but within a very short time, I began to long for the Java documentation standards, where everything is absolutely consistent and very clear, actually, in my opinion, at least. The Java docs they can be relied upon to be accurate. This stuff is all ad hoc, some of it written by borderline aphasics, in my opinion. It's not all that clear. So you kind of suss your way around it and do the best you can, but at least have the bookmarks so you know where to get the stuff. Okay, any volunteers? I, by the way, did a little HTML thing. I don't know if you had anything quite comparable. I just stole from the register dialog or the register page and cut it down to one form. I guess it should be enter challenge. All right. How's that going to be? Yeah, that's a good idea. This one here, talking about, or this one up here? Both. I think you're right. What happens if we keep it as type email? Yeah, what it will do is enforce email standards. It'll be require this at that. And it's a little irritating when you're trying to enter a challenge and it doesn't accept that it's entered until you enter an email. So I think that simple input will do here. Like the other fields that do stuff like first and last name. You should have used those as a model. What about this user.email? We're going to talk about that. Because this was all about like registering, and we're not doing that here. So would I just get rid of the ng model altogether? Let's just dump that. That sound okay? How is this dialog going to communicate to whoever ran it what was entered as the challenge name? There are actually two possibilities, and the one we'll stick with for right now is the one that's most familiar. We'll get to the other in a bit. But how is this dialog going to do that? What's the standard way of making that kind of communication? Mark, what do you think?
Well, you're gonna want to submit it, right?
You can submit it, but then what are you thinking? Because if I submit, I do have a submit button, and I have a click that will pick challenge, but that doesn't say what was actually entered. Can't hardwire it in. I have no dang idea what the guy's going to enter, right?
Yeah.
So what do I do here? What's the standard Angular way to communicate from the view to the underlying model? Looks like you have an answer? No? Not to the controller. The controller's job is simply to manage what? Probably the single most important data structure in all of Angular. Scope. Your scope. Every view got a scope underneath it. And the communication between the view and the scope is a critical pattern. We've seen that already in lots of different cases. It's no different from a modal dialog. We need to have a scope. In fact, remember that one of the things passed in the example code you're already looking at is a scope. We passed the same scope as we're using for the apps controller in general. Don't blur together, and the answer scope probably, or controller probably, is because you think, well, the scope is just like part of the controller. The right view is the scope manages the controller, or the controller manages the scope. The scope was passed in dependency injection. I mean, technically, you could have a controller that doesn't have any scope at all. It wouldn't be much use. But it isn't there because the controller has magically got scope. It's because it was injected in, and then the controller works it. And so does the view. Right? So we need to connect with the view, or with the scope. That's what we've got to do. And we're going to have a property of that scope, right? I think I'll just do something like, I like abbreviations, so I'll abbreviate as selected challenge. Of course, my standard 3-letter abbreviation for challenge everywhere is CHL, so selected challenge, right? That way, whatever they entered will go to that in the scope. Now, let's see how that looks on the other side. What pieces do we need in our scope at this point? We need this property for it to mess with, right? And we're going to need one other thing implied here. I'm not actually sure that you need that, do we? Let's see. Is it necessary for this to actually call that? Do I have to have an on-click handler when the submit button is pressed? It's going to automatically.
Yes, because you want to know when they're done.
You want to know when they're done. That's true. So at least we have to have some way of saying we're done with this dialogue. But does it have to be via calling a function on my scope? That could be kind of awkward, really. There's got to be a standard way to say, I am done with this dialogue now. Was there in the notify dialog? Oh, yeah. $close. And what effect does $close wind up having back in the JS that started the dialogue exactly? Here we do our notify dialog, and we did this thing, we called open, and then eventually it calls $close. And as the $sign implies, it's a built-in, it's really not a scope function at all. What is its final effect? Remember that I had it, I don't know if it's still in there. I think I had it originally, let's see, no it's not. But I did originally have it so that I had result.then, and then I did console log done. When you set up an open, you're putting up a dialog which the user may get to whenever they feel like it. And that implies some kind of callback is needed when they're done. You don't want to sit there looping and waiting for it. You got other things to do. So it's a promise. And the $close resolves the promise so that you can then invoke a .then after it to do whatever you like. Okay. Everybody remember promises? Because we're going to be dealing more with them. Let's see, where do we have one before? We had one in logging controller. Did we have promises? Oh, yeah. Remember, for logging in, we're going to post a session, and that returns a promise, which will ultimately resolve, depending on how long the hit takes on the server, which we can then do a .then call on, and we pass to it a function that is supposed to be run when the promise resolves, and that function gets a response. What response is given depends on the promise. In this case, the result of the HTTP call, which then we worked to get the location, and then we did a get on the session to get the information about who was logged in. I had to get that from the session. So we do a get, and we returned that. Then is expected to return a promise, which can then, so to speak, be .then'd again, and you get promise chaining from that. This is very similar to the waterfall pattern. And the fact that you've now seen two completely different ways to do effectively the same kind of concept suggests that it's a very general idea, and these are just different approaches, right? Okay. So we're going to be doing that, and the open call, actually technically the opens .result. It gives back an object and there's a result field, and that's the promise. That resolves when we do $close. Okay, so I guess what we really need here is $close. After all, change $, sign $close. Okay. Okay. So now what do we have to do with the @s controller? What do I write here? Kevin, what do you think? You got the notify dialog as an example. Got code to look at over Amy's shoulder there. She's probably got it on screen. Say again? So notify dialog has got the model for it. We need to start a modal dialog that uses the HTML we just looked at, and we need then to get back from that when it resolves the chosen challenge name. What does the notify dialog code look like? It's right there. Anybody else? Alex, what do you think? Am I asking a question that's harder than I realize? I want to know how to start up a modal dialog. I've got the HTML laid out. We figured out basically we're going to have an input box, and we're going to have it tied to a property called select a challenge, abbreviated. The $close will be done when we submit, so that we will be done with it and we'll get back our promise. How do I start one? It's right here. Use the open call. And that's in the UIB modal documentation, which is in the Bootstrap UI docs that we just did a bookmark for, right? And it'll be in a million Stack Overflow examples as well, but tried to have the code give you examples also. So we need to do this. UIB open. In fact, I'll just grab this as an example so that I don't have to copy the whole thing. And let's see, what do I have to change here? This will need to be changed, right? And by the way, all paths are from the root, even if you are down in the thing. So we're going to do attempts, and I called it pickchl dialog, right? Okay. Scope still seem reasonable? We wanted to have the same scope that we're dealing with on the @s page. That way anything it writes through will show on our @s page, or we'll be able to deal with it. There is a minor error there. And this is the kind of thing you got to watch for because checking is not that good. You want to be bugging minor things, yeah.
Would you want to just have the word scope there?
Yep. SCP is an abbreviation that was applicable in the other code, but not here. Scope. And scope is fine. One's a tag, the other's an actual value, and they happen to have the same name. But it's no big deal. I'll imagine that small is probably good enough. Dot results. Okay. Anything else I need here? Yes. Dialog is going to be communicating the chosen name, mmindf41, how again? Through scope. What property of scope? Right there, right? So I technically don't need to do this because it would add that to the scope anyway, but I want you to think it through so you see what's going on. What should I do perhaps here? Let's give it an empty string to start with. Now, again, if it's not defined, it'll just get added anyway, but let's give it an empty string. So I want to write cell equals, right? Nope. Run just fine. I'll be baffled. It'll never seem to be quite connected with that. What's wrong? Scope dot, right? We are modifying the scope. The controller is not the same thing as the scope. I just set up a global variable there. This is JavaScript after all. So scope dot. Okay, so kind of stepping back here. What have we done? We set up an HTML file. We have an edit box in there that'll tie by ngbind to a cell property in our scope. The guy types it in, and through Angular magic, it all comes to that and changes it from a quote to something else. And then when they hit submit, then we get a $close call because we put an ng click on that to make that happen. $close results in the dialog shutting down. It's part of the UI Bootstrap system. And that results in what now? I hit my open. The open will return, I suppose. And the open's not going to return until he clicks close, right? Up goes my dialog. I walk away for a cup of coffee. I'm not clicking close. Heck, I don't think I'm going to do it this year. So if open doesn't return until he has clicked closed, what did we just do to our server? Locked. There's only one thread. That open is going to happen instantly. Throw it up and go off and deal with HTTP requests or anything else that may be going on. And there'll be a callback eventually, sort of, not really a callback, but it's the same kind of idea. And when he hits $close, when that click occurs, then what do we get? Promise is resolved. We get a result promise right away. We've got that instantaneously. I feel like I should even put a console. Let's do that. Let's put log hello, just to make the point. Will that happen once the result resolves? As soon as the open call occurs, instantly. The dog is going to be up there. The console log will already have said hello. But when the result resolves, how do I say when this resolves? What do you do then? Dot then. I need a dot then. And that's actually the notation that's common is to bracket down here so you can see this next thing is like waterfall. We put it all in the same notation. And it'll pass some sort of result to it. And let's see here. I think I believe that. Let's get that parenthesis right. My linter is complaining at me. Missing semicolon. What am I talking about? Okay, so what do we want to do in this case? I would think once we got the challenge selected, it's time to actually go and post a new challenge, right? But this is Angular. And one of my principal suggestions on development patterns was baby steps, right? So what are we going to do here? I think maybe just a console log would be a good idea. Let's find out what's going on. What do you want to log? It worked. All right, good enough. Okay. Let's see what happens. I think I got all these pieces. Do we need to do any kind of restart of the server at all? No, I don't think so. This is all been about client side. Okay. Ah, not quite. 404 not found. Well, that's about.
Did we not name it without the template?
Yeah, let's see. Did we not name it without the template? I don't quite get what you meant there.
We, in the template URL, the string hasn't included a template, the dot template, or the file.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. Let's see. No, picture. It's just .html, isn't it? It's not .template. Yeah, thank you. Okay. You can see how valuable that console is, though. Notice the hello, like I said. And then here we are. We can enter a challenge. Go test, submit, boom. I'd like to make sure the communication occurred, though. We went to a long way to get to blasted selected challenge in there. So what do I need to do to make sure the communication actually occurred? Kevin, what do you think?
Print out the variable window.
And literally, what do I print then? Plus what? What's being modified by the dialog? Amy, what's being modified by the dialog? Yeah, the cell shell. That's what I want to print. That suffice? Yep. Here, there wouldn't be mustache because that's only about in HTML when you're inserting stuff. You don't use mustache in the JS. No, it's a more simple answer. I just used a global variable. It doesn't exist. This is JS. Yeah, scope dot. Okay, let's see how that works now. Can that refresh properly? No, I think I know what I did. No. Well, I'll tell you what, it's 7:25. I'm going to debug this, and anybody who wants to help is welcome to, and we'll resume. I think people could use a break at this point. So we'll be back in, let's say, 10 minutes. On both MMind F4.2 and F4.1, so let's do a little bit of quick doctoring in the database. Right. Yeah. And we got only F4.1s now, so we can enter. Okay. So let's see what we got. Did we get it into the database? Well, that's okay because that wouldn't have been reused. I'm lucky. Yeah. Made it in. Okay, so our post is successful. Okay, so that's good. Now what do we want to do?
Refresh that page so that it comes up.
Yeah, I want to refresh the page so that it comes up because it didn't show on the page, did it? So what do I have to do that? The quick and straightforward way and the standard way to do it would be go fetch the attempts again. Right? So let's try that. What do I need to do that? Let's see here. Another then. And this thing is a promise, right? And I don't want to be doing any fetches of the attempts until after that post has succeeded, right? So I want to make sure that I am all done with the post and that it has completed before I do a fetch of the attempts that resulted from it. All right? So I propose the following. And this is an important thing about promises you want to understand. Okay? I'm going to do a dot then because the HTTP post does return a promise. That you can be sure of. And then in here I'll do the get the stuff. I could actually do that, right? There. What's wrong with the indentation there? Or what's wrong with the pattern there? It's going to wind up being a pyramid of doom kind of thing, right? Nested further and further in. Must be some joke I'm missing here. What's line? Anybody gonna fill me in?
Oh, so it's like listening from a bag of chips and then you hear them crunching and like getting.
Oh, I wasn't hearing that. Okay. Well, we'll take him off. There we go. Thank you. All right. So we can do that, but we're down inside another then. That's not the right way to use promise chaining, and that's the important point here. Yeah.
Could you return the post?
You're supposed to return a promise from then. If you want to, let's see, if you don't return anything, I think you automatically get the same promise rolling on from then to then. But I got to look that up. This is kind of new to me too. The common pattern, though, is that each one generates a new promise, and you return it, and then that winds up, now I can hear it, being the result of the then, which is in turn dot then. And so you get a dot then, dot then, dot then chain, but each one has to return a promise for the next dot then to deal with. So we will do a dot then function. And what do I want here, by the way? Do I just say function and that's it? It's a parameter passed, right? When the promise in question is the result of an HTTP post get or whatever, the promise resolves with a value, as all promises do. What value? The HTTP response. Okay. So I'll get some sort of result there that is the HTTP response. The interesting question is, do I really care? Let's see, do we care? Not necessarily. It would be nice, however, at least to know that it worked. So I think what I'm going to do is put in another one of those console logs. And before we try anything more, I have it in my notes here. And let's give a look at the res.headers location, which would be the result of the new attempt post. So we'll know what attempt it was. Should be ID 8, for instance, right? Here's something missing. Identifier instance curly brace. Oh, thank you. There it is. Good. Okay. How would I have known to say res.headers quote location? I'm not going to ask you to look it up, but tell me that you know where to look it up. How do you find out how to get the location header off of the result of an HTTP, a $HTTP post? Again, half the game in all this stuff is knowing where to find it, where to look it up. And not just SO, how do I find the location header from a HTTP post? You know where the damn documents are. So where is this document? What is $HTTP first? Where did it come from?
jQuery?
Not jQuery, no. It's not a jQuery thing. It's an Angular service, a standard Angular service. So the API references, which had a list of services. Remember, I drilled by them real quick when I was touring it. This is $Q and their $HTTP. That's where you go, and it would tell you this information. That's where I go, where I went to get it in the first place. So get rid of this hello because I need to point with that, and we'll reload and see what we get now. Oh, I'm going to have to do this, or it's going to just complain at me. I want that. Okay. And there we go. What will be now number 9. Right? I don't know if you can read it easily up there, but Chris 2 adds 9. So we're good. Okay. So we at least know that worked, and that's nice. So what do we do now? I want to get the attempts. Right? How do I do that? By the way, I could get just that attempt. That would be one possibility. And then tack him on to the current list of attempts at. But it is more common practice to do a full refresh from the database. If we're a huge body of attempts, then you might not want to do that. So it's kind of a choice of whether you get an incremental result from the database or you do the entire refetch. But a whole refetch here is what I will have in mind. So how do I do that? I haven't talked to in a while. Paula, how do you think I do it? HTTP get. And I guess I'm going to do what again? PRSS slash plus user.id plus slash hats. That'll do the job for that. Okay. And do I need to pass anything else to it? I think we're pretty good there because there's no body, right? I don't have to worry about a body. That'd be the next argument. Yeah?
You have an extra
I do have extra quote because this tool keeps wanting to double quote on me. All right, so that's good. We'll get that, right? And then let's see. How are we going to get the result of that? What do I need to do now? Amy, what do I have to do? You have to return from the. How do you return from a promise? It is resolved, to use the actual term, and we put a dot then on it, right? So where am I going to put my dot then? Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, good. I could do a dot then immediately on it because it is a promise that it returns, but we don't want to do that when we do chaining, right? So we're going to do return and then, and sort of begins to get a flow here. And what am I going to do with the result here at this point? Frankly, I'd like to just print it. All right. But everybody be thinking what you're actually going to do with it when we're done. Let's just make sure it really happens. And part of the reason I want to print it is that it will help clarify what we need to do, because it's easy, once again, to get lost in the levels of this thing and forget that you have a data type that, let's see, what am I missing? Yeah, I see it. Thank you. Yeah.
You have one.
Yeah. It's just nice to fill those in. Okay, I don't want a semicolon there. Okay, and one over there for that matter. usual database kill here to have that gone so it doesn't complain about it. Oh, lots of stuff. And that should help also remember what we need to do, because what is res? It's this thing, and it has a data property which is an array of things, right? So it's not itself the array, it's got property data. It was body on the server side, it's data on the client side, remember that drill? So, with that in mind, what is it I have to do? Just one assignment is remaining here to get this right. What is it I have to do to get that to show up there in the list? So Gideon, what do you think?
You have to change scope.apps.
Yeah, I have to change scope.outs. Sorry. And what do I have to do to change it? Thank you. Use the right name. And then what would I be doing? What do I assign into it? Based on what we were just looking at.
You said not to push it, right?
Not to which? Not to push it on. No, we're going to replace it entirely. So simple assignment is good. Res out. Well, we already did one, right? We did this get. That's got the result. We were just printing it. We were looking at that big nasty list of attempts. So just res. Baffling errors result. Dot data. Again, type checking would save us on that, but this is JS. So let's see if that works now. Okay, did I have to clear it again? I forgot if I got that right or not. Let's see. Nope, we're good there. Okay, so start. Do inline. Oh, you know, I think I do have to clear it. Just a sec. Okay, good. And hopefully, there it is. Okay, so that's a pretty long tour, but we wound up finally getting it so that we had the full dialogue communication. From the top, you set up a template, HTML, you tie it to the model, except that we found there were some weird problems with the scope there that I still need to chase down, and it doesn't matter anyway because the usual practice is you extract from it the values you want, and you pass them through the $close, which then shows up as the result value. When you do a dot open, you set all that up, and you do your dot then, and get on the result, dot result dot then, and you get the outcome. And you can modify as you will. Very often you'll have a series of other promises. Remember the pattern of each one has to return a promise so that the next one can be dot then all the way down the line. Also the pattern of checking and checking and checking each and every time, because otherwise too many things could break. Right? There's one thing we haven't done. We haven't dealt with errors. All the way through here, I have been assuming that everything worked. And yet each then, in principle, allows me to add a function after the immediate one to handle the error case, which would be, you got to admit, kind of ugly here at a certain point, wouldn't it? Because I'd have to say after this, then see where did it end right about there. Then I'd have another function for error, and each one could have a different error. It'd be a pain in the neck to handle. You can do it that way, but it's unnecessary. If you do not have a handler in then for an error case, and you just omit that, it goes to the next then. It passes it along down. The same promise. It doesn't make a new promise. It just says, okay, look, this thing failed, so let's get that right there. This thing failed, so we go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And ultimately, somewhere along the line, you could say dot then and give null for the results, the resolved one, comma, and a function for the error, and pick it up that way, almost like a big catch block. But you don't even have to do that because there is a dot catch that at least modern promise systems have. And so at the very end of all this, you can catch an error and handle a situation where there is an error there. Now, in my case, I'm just going to console log it. So let's see what we get. Trying to remember here. I think it goes all the way down even. I have something a little different. So if there is an error, then we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll just put in something like canceled. It can be null, depending on what the exact situation was. And so I won't assume the error is truthy, but if it is truthy, then we'll do a indication of the result. Now, we could do better handling than this, obviously, and that, in fact, something like it is one of the things you're asked to do in version 1 of the project. But let's see what we get now. I'll try the attempt on the same thing again, which should not work because it's already got one in progress. And we get bad request. I'm not sure why that's not working. Tell you what, I'll debug that in a little bit. So, kind of, another break here in a minute. I'll catch that in a minute, but we want to talk about the next thing we're going to do. I want to add a menu drop-down to pick channel. And to do that, what I mean in particular is I want to sorry, I'm just thinking because we're moving more slowly than I thought we would, and I wanted to see if I want to jump anything. Now, let's do this. Right now, I have to remember what the thing I want to enter is. A good design instead would have a drop-down choice of whatever the available challenges were. Go to the database, find them out, choose one, right? I want to do that. There are a couple of different ways we're going to do it here, so that we can get into looking at the UI Bootstrap, but also some of the built-in Angular directives. There's a built-in Angular directive I want to start with. So why don't we take 5 minutes here at least, and well, let's make it 10, but in the 10, please, go and look up the select directive in the Angular API reference. So you're ready to look at that. Mm-hmm.
I still see the ads.
What's wrong with that thing? You watch me post it.
Yeah.
So we're looking under Angular, JS,
Yeah, see those.
activity resource. I wonder if I'm somehow not logged in. That's what's going on. Huh? You know, I think what may be going on is I'm being too quick about it, and requires a description. I forgot. Okay, now give it a shot.
Yep. Okay.
It's just doing that too fast. Hmm?
I wasn't sure if we went over this and I just missed it, but is there a reason why we have to say scope.ads here but not scope.user.id above?
Yeah, it's just because I'm getting away with the fact that it's in Clojure.
Oh, okay.
I could have gotten away without scope dot. No, I can't get away without scope dot ads, but I can get away without the user dot because I'm only using them on my thing. Let's do it right.
Okay, so normally it should be scope.ads.
Yeah, I mean it's better style than to just rely on the Clojure.
Okay.
But I'm getting away with the Clojure. That's what's happening there.
And you're getting the user, like, when you say it's in the Clojure, it's not the scope dot, it's this one? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's that. That is in Clojure.
Okay.
It's a parameter.
So if we have scope up here, does that mean we could also get away with not doing scope dot for all of them, including?
No, because ats by itself without scope dot here would assign to a global variable. So you need to be specific about that. But if I wanted to use just user because this had been assigned into scope, I can either get this
Oh.
or
Okay.
that,
Okay.
as you like.
All right. Thanks.
All right. I think I know the answer on the dialog thing too. I'm pretty sure what it does is creates a subscope. And that's why it's freaking. Does that make sense? You would have to have drawn it from the parent scope and yet been modifying the child scope for that to happen. There it is. Damn it. That's what it's doing. Son of a gun. Okay. Painful. Painful.
I was having trouble logging in. Copy the files, and then I just tried user A, domain A after with password A.
Okay.
The login failed. Noticed that the get was to some sessions with a.
Your sessions are identified by the cookie, so that is as it should be.
Okay.
But it's not found.
Yeah. Checked my sessions, but looks like I don't have a sessions with a cookie kind of.
Oh, you can't get a session?
Yeah. It doesn't seem like I have some notification.
Let me see what's going on.
I'm not sure if it's just different.
Nope, that could just be another change that I had to make and I'd forgotten about.
Oh, maybe.
So let's go look at that right now. So bring your sessions JS up, I'll bring mine up. So we have a get. And a post. And a delete. And a get by cookie. You have a get by cookie?
I don't have get by cookie.
Okay, now we get by cookie. Let's fix that right now. Thanks for trying to get this working. I'll post it right now and tell me if that makes a difference.
Our versions are probably changed. We don't have the get back cookie. In the sessions. So maybe once a week.
Try now. Okay, so let's resume here. Did a bit of research in the break here and found out why that weird thing was happening with the scope where we couldn't get the cell shell to post. Okay. Quick question? Or?
Yeah, I don't think the session.
Polyline just doesn't like me. I'm looking at two files here. And that's not showing?
When you click the link, it just takes you to apps to sessions.
So there's a way to make it work, but it's a hack. Is that what I heard? I'm going to remove this. Yes. Not that I have any confidence that's really going to work. So let me do this verbally while I'm fixing this thing up. Don't look on this. Don't look at the screen. This is just polylearn. But the bottom line is that there are a number of cases where controls will set their own scope that is a child of the scope you gave them. When we supply a scope to the dialog, that's not the scope it's going to use. What it will do instead is create a child scope. And you can get this more from the reading than my examples, because I haven't done as much of it in the examples. But scopes have a parent and child relationship. It's not just one, there's a tree of them. And we've been all at the top level, so it's not been obvious that that's the case. But sneaking in here, there was a case where the dialog created a subscope, and there's an inheritance relationship between them. So the subscope gets everything that's in the parent scope. But evidently, while it can show that, because we did see the X, right? When it modifies, it's modifying only its child scope. So we had what amounts to a scratch scope or a working scope in the dialog. And the only way to get information out of the dialog correctly is to do what we did, to do a $close and pass a parameter to it, or a $dismiss if you want to fail with some error message, but not to expect the binding that works so well in other cases to work in the case of a modal dialog because it does this child scope thing. I would have to look it up. I don't know offhand. My guess is that there might be, but that it would not be considered necessarily good design. The whole idea of a modal dialog in any UI, not just Angular, is that it's its own little world and it does its own little thing, and then it communicates back out. And in this case, the way you communicate back out is apparently through the $close call. Still, there may be a way to do it. I just don't know for sure. So, did you look up the select? Okay, and we got some example code in there. It's a directive, and probably not today, but sometime on Tuesday we'll talk a little more about doing directives. We're going to replace this thing with a select, right? And I'll use the examples that are right there in the API, or at least one thereof. There are a couple of different ones. So let's do this one will talk to my scope correctly, so I'm going to do the cell shell thing for that. And then, no, I'm misspeaking, but we'll at least do a talk to the child scope. And then we're going to do this. Let's do the repeat. So a select requires a list of options underneath it, each of them an option tag, and we will repeat that tag using the already known ngRepeat directive. And we will, in each one, put a challenge name. So we're going to create a set of options that has one entry per challenge, and we're going to need to do the notation that to get it. And let's see if I need to finish my select. Line. So we got this all. So the ng model is that. The options repeating are this value each time, and that will get us the select pattern with one important requirement, however. I need challenges. I need a loop or an array of strings I can loop through to put in the select choice. And that's going to require something from the scope, right? So let's do that. How do I change the scope to get me challenges? Oops. Save that. Cats controller. What do I need to do here? First of all, where should I do it? I mean, early, later, where in the code? To get a list of challenges. So, Kel, what do you think?
Question again?
Where should I do this? I'm going to get a list of challenges for this select thing to put into its choices, and that's the job of the controller in the scope. Yep, we'll need to generate a new promise to do it. Given that we are going to be using it in the dialog fairly early on, I think we'll need to get that set up.
I guess.
So I need to get a list of challenges. How do I do that? In fact, you know,
Return an HTTP.
good. But I'm actually jumping the gun here. What should I be doing from a software engineering standpoint at this point? I've just used a brand new control. I hope to God it works. What do I want to do? Let's just do something canned here, right? So I just want canned challenges for it to use, and then we'll see if we can actually get this stuff off of the server instead. So what do I do to do that? So scope.challenges, and it's expected to be an array, so world, that'll work. So we're going to expect to see hello and world as two alternate choices here, right? Now let's see if that works. I think I lost my... Yeah, go. Ta-da. Okay. Our console log says we have error, and the tag is bad challenge name. Yeah, that's not surprising. So our error system is working there too. That's cool. All right, so let's get some good challenges on this instead, get the right names. And to do that, back to Hale's suggestion, we're going to do an HTTP GET, right? So what do you want to do with that? Exactly. What do I put in here?
The URL for getting challenge.
It's just CHLS. Okay. And I don't think I need that really. Sorry. Don't need the slash. Okay. And then what am I going to do with that? I think I should have the slash at the head of it. Get that wrong. Right. Don't need a body. It's just a get. So now what? What does it return? Not the result exactly. I'm looking for a different word. Begins with P. Promise. This thing starts a promise, right? It's not going to happen instantaneously. So we need to do a dot then. And then we will get the result, which we will do what with? I think challenges needs to be updated here, right? So I propose there. That'll do it. Yeah, res.data. Remember, res is the entire results. It's got all sorts of other things like, you know, status code and so forth. So res.data. That's better. Yeah.
So before we were running
So now we're running on, so the subtlety here is the HTTP whatever, get, post, you name it, that returns a promise. You can dot then that. The UIBM.open being written by somebody who was, I don't know, wanted more information back from it, I guess, has a object it returns. It does not return a promise. But within said object, there is a result property, which is the promise. So this is a quirk of the open call, that it returns a full JS object. You can, and you get the dot result property of the object. We're not calling dot result, that is just dot result, right? And then that is a promise on which you can do a then call to register a function to be called when the promise resolves, which occurs when the dialog closes, right? Okay. And what would you have found out about that, other than Stack Overflow? Angular UI, Bootstrap. This is all in the Bootstrap UI controls. And it would have been in a GitHub, and you'd have gone and looked down the documents and muttered about the shoddy way they document stuff, but it'd be in there somewhere. Yeah. And of course, you get examples on Stack Overflow as well to save your life that way. Okay, so what do I want to do when this thing is done? I've set the challenges. That's good. Is that enough? That should be. Let's just do that. Semicolon in there, and we're good. So will this work? You should be a little bothered by this. I'm thinking, okay, we do this. We registered it. We got our challenges now. Let's assume that assignment on line 11 works right, though it doesn't, but we'll get there. And it's a step in the right direction. The dot data was good. It takes a little more than that. And now we're going to do our open. Because we are normal sequential thinking programmers who believe that when you do a series of lines of code, they run one after another, right? No, what's going to happen here? When I go to, I'll short circuit, we won't do the test. When I go to the dialog, even if that assignment worked correctly, I will find that there is still just hello world in challenges. And I wonder why my get call didn't work when in fact it worked just fine. Yeah.
So we're not gonna
Good. The then does not happen right away. It happens whenever the get comes back, and even at the speed of JS, that's 1,000 times as long as any one line of code. It's in the milliseconds to go across the internet, get that stuff, and bring it back. And what will happen is we'll say, oh yeah, we'll get to that. Whenever it then occurs, that's nice. Now we're going to immediately open the dialog. That then hasn't happened yet. And we will proceed from there. So, no. What do I need to do? I think pretty much we better not be doing this, right? Let's just put it right in there. So we don't want to open that dialog until this promise to get those challenges resolves, right? That'll do it. So what am I going to do with that dot then here? I could do that, right? That result dot then I do other things. But did you notice I just dropped in the nested level? Now my entire danged rest of the function is in the handler of the original get. I do not want to see code marching off the right end of the page like this, folks, especially not promise chains. Don't do this to promise chains. What's the right solution here? I want this then to actually work on the same level as this then. I want this then's result. So I guess I want to close that, and then do a dot then, I guess a semicolon there maybe, on that. All right. Does that look good? So now what I just said was, what's it griping at me? Suppression. Good. So what do I have to do? What do I have to return? Yeah, I'm going to do a return here. You guys are starting to get this. This is good. Okay. So that is necessary because that will return a promise, which promise is the result of my then, and that will automatically then cause the next one to weight on its resolution. Right? And again, you could have done the other way, but if you do, you're going to drive yourself nuts with nested, nested, nested. Don't do that. Keep it all at the top level, just chain dot, then dot, then dot, then all at the same level. Yeah. Okay, this is good. We're almost there. We're going to have a problem with this, however. And again, it's that bit about if you were in Java, you'd have types. It would tell you about this, but it isn't going to do it here. Those two things are not the same type. SCP challenges is meant to be an array of strings, yes? That's what we wanted. Is dot data going to produce for me an array of strings? What is the result of a get call on challenges? It's an array of objects which have name and description. And all I wanted was the names. So I'm going to have to do some little array loopy thing. Okay. Now, again, I don't want to see somebody write 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 lines of loop code here when what they really want to do is this. I think that's it. Let's see, I'm missing a process. Why am I missing a semicolon? The hell is a semicolon missing there? All right, we'll figure it out in a minute. Oh, no, now it's okay. All right. res.data.map function val return val.name. This is such a common operation in web-oriented stuff for the very reason we're dealing with it. Here we got this array of objects, but we really just want one field out of them. That's a very common use of this. That the map function is available for you to do this. Remember for each in our JS discussions? The array in JS has a for each method, and that method automatically loops through the array, and you give it a function which is past each element of the array. And in fact, it's more than just the value. It's also got the index and the entire array if you want to look at the second and third parameters, though most people never even bother. You just look at the first one. Now that almost does the job, and you could do a for each, and then for each value do a push onto the challenges. But there's a slightly more elegant way to do it. The map function creates a brand new array by the result of each function call here. So the map goes through the array that it's called on, data, calls this function on each, which function is expected to return the value, which value becomes the element of a new array that is parallel matching element by element the other one based on what that function returned. So another way would have been do an iterative element transformation is basically what map means in this context, and that will get us what we seek. Okay? Be aware of that tool. It's very useful for these kinds of things, and it happens a lot. All right, if I've done everything right, this will work. Let's see. Drum roll. Yes. Okay. Okay, so we've done a select, and we've done the fetch and all, and done the chaining. I want to try something a little different here. Sometimes when you do a select, it's more useful, as it were, to have the actual objects themselves. Right now, what's going to happen when I do a cell challenge, I am jumping the gun here. Let's see the result of this, because we want to get clear on what we're going to get out of this so that I can justify what I'm about to offer to do. We get down here, and let's see, that one there does say log, so let's go look at the log and see what we got back from it. There, making new attempt on mmind f41. Okay. Well, that's a bad channel name. It's interesting. I'm not sure that's not an error in my own logic, but I get back to string. There are some times when in select you'd rather get back the object. And so there's a slightly different alternative with a select that I'd like to explore briefly here. In 20 minutes? Hold on a minute. No, I'll do that on Tuesday. let's wrap back to that on Tuesday. We haven't done a display of the steps. So let's look at that because it's a little more conventional and less of a digression. So this is working now. Let's go on to look at a display of steps. So when I had this up here, we were all dealing with the start new attempt, but this is also supposed to be possible to click on these guys, and right now they just say check attempt 1, check attempt 2, but what they're supposed to do is go to a page that will display the steps for that attempt. So let's build that. Right? And again, I'm going to ask you to step back and look at what we've done so far and think about what you have to do to build a page now that will be kind of like this thing, except that it's going to say steps for, and I think maybe some sort of header that describes the attempt that's being shown steps for, or maybe let's just get the challenge name, you know, steps for this challenge. And then the steps themselves, we'll start by just printing them out as an iterative pattern with the input and the result for each one. Remember, they have an input and a result. Later on, we're going to modify that probably on Tuesday to add a directive of our own. But for now, just that. So what do I need to do? It's my starting point here. See him? So open something new in the way of a file. What kind of file do you want to create? Make a subdirectory. Let's do that first. I'm going to abbreviate it all STPs because that's the letter abbreviation thing there. So what do I need in steps? What are the major pieces I'm going to have? I'm going to need a template of some sort, right? Need a partial to show this stuff. And that's probably going to have a controller with it too, right? So let's do that. Let's see here. We can get a copy out of this. You know, whatever. Let's see if that works. Yeah, good. Okay, and I'll rename that. And so we can start with the template, but let's do steps for. I don't know if it's going to be username and last name, first name, last name. Let's just hold on and figure that out in a bit. We might have a start new step function, so it makes sense to keep that around, I suppose. Right. So I'm modifying the attempts partial to have something comparable here. All right. And then I do want to see the steps, right? So what are we going to have to do here? Step in steps, maybe? What the heck? Yeah. Let's do that. Now I had coloration on the attempts. We can put that in there. Let's change that to step color. Yeah, I don't know if we ever looked closely at that. Did we? I've forgotten if we talked about what that was doing. Does everybody understand what an ng class directive does? This allows you to set up or choose a class, a style, like a CSS class, not some other use of it. In this case, there are several pre-built ones that are available to make the panels different colors. And we had a function that would return one of those panel dash, I think normal panel dash warning, something like that. It's in the code. And so we'll do something similar maybe for steps. We'll see. Maybe we can color them differently if they're already done and have a result, or if they're waiting for a result. And then I don't know if we need to check the steps. That's kind of not useful. Let's get rid of that. What am I going to put in here? What will a step have in the way of properties? So like input and result. Those are the two fields of a step object. So let's do that. Check my notes here, make sure I'm not messing this up. about that. So now, give me a top-level summary of what we're going to have to do in the controller for this thing. What do you expect it to accomplish? What are its properties going to be? First, just straight up. We've got the temps controller here as an example, I guess. So, Jacob?
Do we new method for starting a step?
Okay.
Getting step color,
What about scope properties?
giving scope properties for challenge name, a steps array.
Yeah. So we need a challenge name, a steps array. Just going to fill some of that in. We're going to have a challenge name in the header. I didn't actually put that in, but I said I might, so let's do that. And we're going to have a steps thing going on here. Keys. Okay. And those functions that I mentioned. Let's do start new step. And we'll clean this out for now. All that. And then we're going to do that anymore. Get step color. And that's what that'll do. Does that. Okay, so there we go. How are we going to get this information? First of all, the fast answer in a dependency injection system is by the dependencies that were injected and no other means than that. So I guess the better question is, what do we want injected into this thing? Am I going to need HTTP? Yeah, I think probably, because I'm going to be doing a few hits on the server for that. I need the state. What is state again? That's the router go thing that makes me, do I need to go anywhere in this thing? Probably not. I might be able to get by without state. Let's dump that. Certainly need scope, Lord knows.
Are we creating a new file? Yes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we are. Let's see. How do I get away with this?
Save those.
I think I'm just worried that I'd already saved it. That's all. But let's fix that. Thank you, Mikhail. You're catching all my dumb errors. I appreciate this. Okay, and just for good measure, let's see if I can get, well, yeah, that's what Git's for. I'll be okay. So, where am I going to, let's see, we're going to fix this up. Attempt state filter. I don't think I need that. Attempts, I need that. User, UIB modal, what do you think? I don't think we're going to do any modal dialogues here. It's not that kind of thing, at least not yet. We can add it back if we need it later. I don't think I'm doing any first and last name, but I did want to know the challenge name, didn't I? That might be a part of an attempt. So maybe I'll ask that there be an attempt. And I'm going to need some kind of list of steps here, right? I had attempts fed in before when I was listing attempts. I'm going to have to do the same thing with steps. And this general process, by the way, is when, to be sure you realize is important in a DI system. One of your first questions when you're designing a new controller is, what do I need to inject? And you can change it later, but at least let's get to a good starting point with it. So narrow this down a bit. And okay, and then the next question is, where are those going to come from? Now, the state, the scope, HTTP, that all will be injected by the Angular system for me if I ask for them, right? Where did ats and user come from in the prior case? Where does that obtain from? How did the ats controller get that stuff? I'm going to call people. Hmm?
UI
Yeah, came from the routes, remember? So if we're going to route to something, we, in the UI routes, can set up a new state. So we're going to need a new state here, all right? Let's see, we get the semicolons right. State steps. And, well, what the heck? Let's just grab this and see what we get. Get a property list of things. Okay, so we've got to have a URL for this new state, right? And I guess that's going to be what? Or I could even shorten it down to just attempt at ID because it's really about the attempt and it's showing me the step attempts. I could do it either way. I think I'll probably just drop the steps. Just leave it at that. Remember, the URL doesn't have to exactly correspond to your REST interface. It's just a name you'll use to be able to go places, right? And to bookmark. All right, template URL. I guess it's going to be steps.template.html. Right? Hopefully. I'll have a steps controller here. Okay. And then we get to our resolve. What do I need to change here? I just want an attempt and steps. Okay. Probably a couple of gets once again. But not going to be pers, right? It's going to be a particular attempt. Whoa. Before I was able to do this by getting the person ID from PRMs. Where did that come from again? When you do a go, you are allowed to supply a set of parameters to the go. Right? And that's how I was expecting even to get at ID. So parameters.at ID. And where do the parameters come from? Well, when I do a go, let's see, what's a good example? Login control. I did one there, go to ats. And then I get an object passed along with it. The $state service, it is wired into the UI router, supplied by the UI router, lets you say, here's the state I want to go to. So we jump the URL there, get the right controller, get the HTML up there plugged in. But it also allows you to give it some parameterization so that you can, like, well, for instance, get the right attempt. Right? So I suppose we're going to get, whenever we do a go, we're going to expect an at ID to go with that go to tell us what at we want to go to. Right? Also, it'll be in the URL, as we saw already. And that means that even if we bookmark and go to this thing from a bookmark, the URL will tell us what at ID. Whether we do it by programmatic go or by bookmark URL, either way we'll get what we want. So let's see, where are we here? Routes there. Okay, so let's assume that I have that at ID. And I'm going to get, see, I don't need the /ats anymore, right? Because it's @/ID. Okay. And does everyone remember what Q.resolve does? Immediately resolves the promise. Immediately resolves the promise. So I will say once this comes back with a then the promise is resolved, and that will, in fact, cause the UI router to go to the route. It waits for all the promises to resolve, right? Okay, so let's see down here, same thing going on. We need attempt ID. We're going to get ats, and I think we're going to need steps, right? Okay. And there. Okay. So look good. My indentation needs some fixing, but other than that, we're fine. Okay. All right. So now we have that injection. What do I do now? How do I do the challenge name? Somebody else? Alex, what do you think? Injected the at and the steps. Those are going to be my main sources of data here. I want to just have the challenge name so I can put that up as part of my page. If you don't have the REST interface memorized, it's in the attempt. There's a .challenge name in attempt. It says what challenge it's in attempt for. So we can get that with. And then what about the steps, do you think? Yeah, I just copied it across. It's there. Okay, we're good. Okay. Is that about it? We can do the start new step and get step color later on. We'll come to that when we get there. But for right now, should that be able then to give us what we need for the view of this thing? There. What do you think? Let's try it out. So what I was hoping was I click this and I'll go to the steps for that, right? And we're still just saying check attempt 1 and it's giving a repeat count there because it's saying the same thing over. And if you're not familiar with the console, by the way, if you say the same line over and over again instead of just showing it again and again, it shows a repeat count. That way if you get some long loop, it doesn't destroy your output. So what's wrong here? I'm pretty sure that when we go back to the attempt controller, assuming I didn't completely destroy my own code, that bad edit, we're going to find that if we do a check attempt, it's still saying check attempt. Oh, so what do I need to do here? Hold on. Leon, what do you think? You idea on that? Where's Leon? There. Well, how am I going to do here instead of console log check attempt? Remember the whole routing system here, right? We jump from view to view. The router system controls it. We just identified a new route with steps and all, right? But I need to make it do that. How do I invoke that route? See, Daniel? I'm getting a feeling some people know the answer and don't necessarily jump in, so raise your hand if you do, and I'll call in. Yeah.
Is it state go?
Yeah, we need to do a $state go here. Remember, that's how we make the state shift around, at least under program control. You can also do it by bookmarking the URL, and it'll pick that up automatically, but we need a state go here. Okay, and I guess that's going to be steps, right? And that's all I need? Remember that I also need the attempt ID as part of the parameters? Yeah, let's just run it and see what happens without it. I haven't actually done this before, so I'm curious. Semicolons in there too, so. Okay. Refresh. Right. Yeah. 404 not found. What that's about. pretty baffling. Steps 404 not found. Well, I don't know if it's a very good error message, but we didn't give it the attempt ID to use, did we? It has no way of knowing that. And I notice it's not in the URL either. It left attempt ID out, so I guess that's kind of its way of saying you didn't give me attempt ID. Let's go back and look at the code then. When I look at UI routes, this is the thing we're trying to go to. And it assumes that I have an attempt ID, which I've embedded in the URL as well. All right. And that is supplied, remember, from the Go. And so we need to add in. Let's see. Oh, sorry, wrong place. From the temps controller here, we need to add in. And we've been given the attempt ID itself as our parameter. Remember, we were saying check 1, check 2. It was actually giving the attempt ID. So that should take care of us. Let's see here. What's wrong? Oh, yeah. Let's see if this works. Okay. Well, at least we're getting somewhere. So I routed through to our steps thing. We have our start new step. Apparently there's something going on over here that we'll have to diagnose. And it being 9 o'clock, that means Tuesday we'll diagnose it. Okay.